Okay, here we go. Okay, everybody. First of all, welcome. I hope that everybody is both safe and not too bored or not overworked. You guys chose this topic, so I'm taking responsibility. This is a little bit of a tough one, but I think it's worth the effort if you want to put it in. If you really want to understand it well, you have to buy the book. It's on sale now, actually, and you can have it delivered to your door. You go to the Koren website. I get about $1 per book, so you should buy lots and lots of them. It's a segula to have one in every room, or at least it's a segula for me if you have one in every room. The book is the Intellect. Okay, whatever. Because we want to talk about the Makos. We actually, those of you who held on here and actually started a little bit longer, I gave one class on understanding the Makos. There's a horrible noise. Let's see.
Oh, sorry. I think that's my wagon. Okay, I'm going to put myself on mute.
Yeah, everyone should go on mute except, let's put everybody should mute except for Sharon. That's better. Okay, great. Okay. Welcome, whoever just joined us. Okay, so quick, how do we relate to the Makos? How do we relate to the plagues? The simplest understanding, the obvious understanding is, what was the deal with the plagues? The plagues were the means by which HaKadosh Baruch Hu got the Jewish people out of Mitzrayim. The problem with understanding it that way is, how many plagues does HaKadosh Baruch Hu need if all he's doing is using them as a means to an end of getting us out? Presumably it would be enough for him to have just one or none at all, however you want to look at it. But there were 10 plagues, and we're always, one thing that we spoke about so many times in Midrash Tehillah is whenever you see something like this, which is taking place over time, or using different kinds of things for doing things, it means there's some kind of a process taking place. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not need process. Anything that's taking place through process, it means it's for us, right? So if he just wanted to get us out, that can be instantaneous. If he's doing it through 10 plagues, it means that there's something that we're supposed to be experiencing as a result of going through those 10 plagues. Question, what is it? So that the idea that those Makos are more than just a means is confirmed by the Rambam that I always go back to. Go look it up on your own. Hilchos Chametz Umatzah in the 7th chapter over there. He begins by asking about the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, and he tells us that it's a mitzvah aseh min Torah l'saper b'nisim v'niflo shenasu lavuseinu. We're supposed to talk about the miracles and wonders that we experienced in Mitzrayim. Right now, if it doesn't even mention leaving Egypt whatsoever. So if the whole idea was that we're supposed to get out of Egypt and the plagues are a way of getting out, he should have told me that the Sipur is talking about, the story is talking about leaving Egypt, and the plagues are the means. But no, he says the whole idea of the story is to talk about the miracles and wonders. It's clear that the essence of what's going on over here is not the departure by means of the miracles, but in a certain sense, the departure becomes an opportunity to experience those miracles. Question is, what is it that we're supposed to be getting out of that experience of the Nisim, out of the plagues? So again, that brings us back to everybody. You can all sing along in the privacy of your rooms with your mutes on. The famous Ramban at the end. You can do it. Yeah, at the end of Parshas Bo, right? We spoke about it so many times, where the Ramban tells us that the basis of our Emuna, our recognition, our testimony to the existence of a Borei, of a creator of the world, is through the experience of Nisim, right? If the physical world were the basis of reality, then the natural order would be the most fundamental structure of reality. Miracles would be impossible. The fact that we experience systemic miracles indicates that there is a source to that physical reality. It's indicative of the Borei. That's also going to see that. You can go see it at the famous Ramban at the end of Parshas Bo. The other place to look it up is go look at the Eser Dibros, the 10 Commandments over there. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Asher Hotzeisicha Me'eretz Mitzrayim. I am the Lord your God that took you out from Mitzrayim. Go look over there. The Ramban says that very, very beautifully. Those are both sources that are well worth familiarizing with yourself with and taking a look at them. But the bottom line is the Ramban tells us the purpose of those experiencing those Nisim. What? Take a breath. The purpose of experiencing those nisim is through them we become familiar with the Creator. We don't even need the Ramban. We can go directly to the Psukim, right? The Psukim in the beginning of Parshas Bo. Kadosh Baruch Hu tells us he's ichbarati es libo ves leva v'adav, talking about Paro. Kadosh Baruch Hu hardened the heart of Paro and his servants for the express purposes of Laman Shishi Ososai Ela Bekirbo, to place my wonders in his midst, meaning he hardens Paro's heart. Paro doesn't let the Jews out in order to increase the Makos in Mitzrayim. To what end? Laman Tisaper Ba'azne Bincha Ven Bincha. We should be able to tell over in the ears of our children and our grandchildren, those of us who have them, even though we can't see them this Pesach, whatever. We should tell them about these windows, right? These wonders that we saw. V'yadatem ki ani Hashem, in order that you should know that I am Hashem. Right? The purpose of experiencing these makos is to come to a recognition of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, fine. So that's the basic outline. I spoke about this before. When I spoke about the makos before, we're going to do it in a different. We're going to look at it in a different way. In a certain sense, I'm really just laying down the foundations for you in terms of an approach as you begin to explore these makos and try to understand what we can get out of them. But the bottom line, we start now asking the question, okay, I understand that I'm going through a certain process in experiencing these makos, but I can't help but notice that there are 10 of them. Why? Why 10? I can understand I need more than one in some kind of process. Why 10? So the truth is, once we recognize that the point of the process is coming to recognize the Borei, the creator of the world, there is a tenishness which is relevant to that idea of Bria of creation. We have sources both in the Mishnah, in the Gemara, in the Zohar, in the Medrash. Over and over again, we're told, Basara Maimaros, Kadosh Baruch Hu created the world. He created the world through 10 different statements. Go ahead and take a look at Maisa Bereshis. Vayomer Elokim Yehi Or. God said, let there be light. God said, let there be a Rakia in the Shemayim. God said, let the waters collect themselves. God said, let there be lights, luminaries in the Shemayim, right? You'll count over there. You'll actually only see 9, but the Gemara itself fills in that Bereshis Nami Maimer. Bereshis also hints to us the fact that there was an additional Maimer, an additional statement. Bottom line is the Kadosh Baruch Hu created the world through 10 statements. I have 10 plagues that have the purpose of revealing to me the existence of the Creator. That Creator was manifest himself in the world through his creation through 10 Maimaros, through 10 statements. In other words, there were 10 stages to the process of creation, meaning that there are 10 distinct aspects or facets to creation. This is suggestive of the fact that there's a connection between the Eser Makos, the 10 plagues, which are revealing the Creator, and the Eser Maimaros, the 10 stages or facets through which creation comes into being. Some level, each one of these plagues seems to be responsible for revealing on some level to me a distinct aspect of creation. And really, way to understand it is the goal is to recognize the Creator. And the way we come to recognize the Creator is by understanding existence as a creation. I come to understand existence as a creation when I come to know that there is a Creator. Fine, okay, so there must be some connection between the plagues and these different facets. Okay, we're still left with the question of why. We know why there are 10 plagues. Where there are 10 plagues because they're revealing the 10 facets of creation. But I really haven't answered anything, because now my next question is, fill in the blank, why are there 10 facets? Why is creation created in these 10 stages? Why is it broken up in this particular way? That one already, we have a direct answer from Chazal, a Mishnah in Perkei Avos, that asks the question, Basar Maimaros Nivra Olam. This is in the very beginning of the 5th parak of Perkei Avos. Go look it up when you have time. Basar Maimaros Nivra Olam. Through 10 statements, the world was created. This is the place in the Mishnah where that particular that idea is given over to us. Same questions we asked by the plagues. Why is it that a country creates the world through 10 statements? He could have created them with one statement. So answers the Mishnah Perkei Avos, Eli para min harashoyim shema abdin es ha'olam shenivra basar maimaros. In order to pay back, in order to punish the evildoers that cause the world that was created in 10 statements to be lost, uliten schar tov letzadikim, and also to give a good reward to the righteous shemekaimim es ha'olam sheniver b'asar ma'amaros, those tzadikim that uphold a world that's created in 10 statements. Obviously, a very, very strange statement on the part of Chazal, right? Could have created the world in one statement. No, he created in 10. Why? Because he wants to be able to punish the evildoers that destroy the world that was created in 10 statements, and to reward the righteous for upholding the world that was created in 10 statements. So, okay, what are we supposed to do with this? So then we have to ask ourselves a question. On what is dependent the ability to either punish or reward? So that's something that we spent a lot of time on in Midrashet Tehillah. You can't punish someone for their actions, or for that matter, reward them for their actions, unless they are responsible for those actions. Meaning, if those actions are actions that are taken out of free choice, right? So effectively, what this statement is saying, in order to be able to punish the Rishoyim for destroying the world and to reward the tzaddikim for upholding the world, they have to be acting out of free choice. And according to the Mishnah in Perkei Avos, the only way that's possible is if the world is created through 10 statements, right? Why not through one statement? Let us punish the evildoers that destroy the world created in one statement, reward the tzaddikim. So the Mishnah conveys the idea that only as a result of the fact that the world is created in 10 statements are the actions of the Rishoyim and the actions of the tzaddikim actions that are taken out of free choice. Basically what that means is, I can only choose to act righteously or evil if God is not immediately apparent. I have to be able to choose, I have to act in order to recognize the Kadosh Baruch Hu, but I also can only be responsible if I'm capable, if I choose to find a Kadosh Baruch Hu, of actually finding him. And basically what the Mishnah in Perkei Avos is saying is, the world, by being created in 10 statements, there are enough layers in creation between the creator and us that we do not see a Kadosh Baruch Hu immediately. That has to be an act of choice to recognize a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Yet if we choose to strive to recognize him, there is a path there that we can go down in order to discover and find him. So basically what the Mishnah in Perkei Avos is telling us is, the world is created in 10 statements. What that means is there are 10 different layers to the creation. Remember that what's the Hebrew word for world? Olam. What is olam? What's that root olam also mean? What is it related to? The word ne'elam, which means hidden. The Hebrew term for world is the same as the word for hiding, because the physical finite world obscures the infinite creator who is behind it. The physical reality is thick enough that the creator is not immediately obvious to me, but it's not so thick that I can't find him if I choose to try. These 10 statements obscure Kadosh Baruch Hu by putting layer after layer after layer between me and him, but at the same time, they give me the opportunity to peel back those layers successively and discover the creator if I choose to search him out. Okay, so now we have some idea. Again, we're trying to understand the 10 Makos. We intuitively recognize since the Makos are in order to bring us to Emuna in the Creator, they're related to the 10 statements by which Kadosh Baruch Hu creates. Somehow these 10 statements are coming to reveal to us the fact that the world is a created place. We now understand why there are 10 statements, why there are 10 facets to creation, and therefore why there would have to be 10 plagues. But exactly what are these 10 statements and these 10 layers? Why they exist? They make of Emuna a choice. What are the 10? So basically, Chazal identify 10 distinct stages in any act of creation. Basically, from the moment of inspiration that I want to create, to the recognition of what it is that I want to create, the formulation of a plan in order to create it, and then actualizing that plan, and then ultimately producing what it is that I'm creating and releasing it as an object distinct from myself. Chazal identify 10 distinct stages. They can see it in our act of creation, and they recognize it reflected in the 10 Maimaros that we see in Kadosh Baruch Hu's creation. It's important to understand that what's going on over here is, in other words, we create through 10 stages, which we can identify, and we can see these 10 statements reflected also in the Kadosh Baruch Hu's 10 statements. These 10 statements, these 10 stages are what are known also as the Sfirot. If you're familiar with the Eser Sfirot, we're talking about the same thing over here. Those Eser Sfirot are basically 10 midot, 10 characteristics, 10 character traits the Kadosh Baruch Hu manifests as he goes through an act of creation, and we can see them mirrored in ourselves in our own acts of creation. Now, that's not meant to be what's known as an anthropomorphism. We are not projecting onto a Kadosh Baruch Hu what we find in ourselves is actually the opposite. We understand that when we talk about the fact that a Kadosh Baruch Hu goes through 10 stages of creation, what's going on is the Kadosh Baruch Hu is revealing himself to us through his creation for the express purpose of giving us the opportunity to connect and relate to him. In other words, this God himself, a Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Ein Sof, the Echad, this being who is unitary, not physical in any way whatsoever. We have to understand that way in order to be able to have any concept whatsoever of his ability to create something from nothing, our creation. We can't talk about that being, but we can talk about how that being chooses to reveal himself to us in the context of creation, and what he reveals for the express purpose of giving us the opportunity to actually be able to relate and connect up to him. What is the ultimate way for us to connect up to Kadosh Baruch Hu? We connect to him by emulating him. We emulate him. It's the language of the sages. And the Mesilas Yesharim is, for example, Mahu Rachum, Af Ata Rachum. A Kadosh Baruch Hu is merciful. If we're merciful, what we're doing is we're actualizing a trait of mercy that actually originates in a Kadosh Baruch Hu. We become connected to him like a branch after the tree from which it's growing. Because the Kadosh Baruch Hu is the source of the existence of a character trait of Rachamim. And if I express Rachamim myself, the ultimate source of that Rachamim, I'm drawing it out of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore I become connected to him through this act of Rachamim. On another level, right, we want to understand it through emulating someone. We actually have the ability to connect and resonate with them. For example, if someone is a builder, let's say he's built some gigantic 80-story skyscraper someplace, downtown Miami, wherever it is, right? He's a builder. If I build a house, what I'm building is on a completely different order of magnitude from what he's built. And yet, as I go through the process of building, I have to look at a situation like a builder, right? I'm faced with all the frustrations that come up with building, the same frustrations that the skyscraper maker is going to face, just on a different scale. I'll go through the same joy and satisfaction when what I've created actually exists that he has when he builds a skyscraper. We have a certain shared understanding and ability to resonate with one another, because just as he created a skyscraper, I created a building. We both went through the same process of doing it, not only just the actions, but the emotional structure of going through that process of building allows me to connect and understand that person in a profound way. The emulation is a way of connecting up. So if we understand that emulation offers us the primary manner of actually connecting to a Kadosh Baruch Hu ultimately reveals himself into the world as a creator. I have the opportunity to connect to him by emulating that and being a creator in my own right. But that's only the case if the manner in which I create resembles the manner in which he creates. For sure, we do it with people. Yeah, that's I give the example of the builder. We resonate with other people in that way, this is the way we can resonate with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Just like he's a creator, we are creators. Since his ultimate relation with the world is as the creator, the ultimate way in which we can emulate and therefore connect to Kadosh Baruch Hu is if we are creators in our own right. Essentially, one of the things that comes out from this is on the most fundamental level, what it is to be human. Since we were created in order to have this connection with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, what it is to be human is to be a creator. That is our opportunity to emulate the Kadosh Baruch Hu. That's our opportunity to connect up with them. But that's only the case because the way in which we create parallels the way in which a Kadosh Baruch Hu creates. He reveals himself into the world specifically for the purpose of giving us the opportunity to emulate and connect him. Therefore, we are created in order to reflect the manner in which he reveals himself into the world. He goes through these 10 stages. We can see them in Esther Maimaros. If we look carefully, and we're not going to do that today, but just understanding that the Chazal identified those same 10 stages or character traits, aspects of the building process that we see reflected in the Kadosh Baruch Hu through these 10 Maimaros. Okay, so the whole idea here is that we are given the ability to, again, one more time, Eser Makos. What's their purpose? To reveal the creator, right? In what sense is it revealing a creator? Because the world was created in 10 facets. Ultimately, what's going on over here is each one of the plagues is effectively teaching us how to see in each one of these different facets of creation and existence the fact that they are creations, that they are created. Once we come to understand our existence as a creation, then inevitably contained within that is the recognition that there's a creator behind it. So basically, how are we looking at this? So Kadosh Baruch Hu creates the world through these different stages. We're not going to go through them in detail. I'll give you one example at the end, but I just want to understand sort of the structure, how the whole thing is working. Kadosh Baruch Hu creates through these 10 statements. Each one of these 10 statements are the basis of a certain facet of creation. Why is it that the Egyptians do not recognize Kadosh Baruch Hu, the creator? Because they misunderstand each one of these various facets of existence. Instead of seeing them as a creation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they see them as, the Egyptians would have seen them idolatrously, but idolatry is ultimately just a projection of self. They're seeing these things in a manner in which instead of revealing the world is created by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they really see that world as on some level an extension of an idolatry source, which is the same as saying they see it as an extension of themselves. What happens in each one of the makos, again, I'll give you an example in a second that'll make it much clearer, is that what we see as a makkah was in fact what was happening was in each, let's go straight to an example that maybe this will make it easier. I'm going to give you one example tonight, and if people want to do more, then we can try and find a time to get together to do it in more detail. The last of the Maimaros of the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, first of all, Kadosh Baruch Hu created the world through these 10 statements. Each one is introducing another layer of finite reality, and therefore each one is creating another curtain, if you want to put it that way, between us and the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Right? If we want to get back to the creator behind that creation, we need to draw those curtains back, but we're coming from our distant place far away from him. We have to go in the opposite order of the creation. Think of each act of creation making more of a concrete finite reality, blocking Kadosh Baruch Hu out, layer after layer after layer. He now stands behind 10 curtains. I'm outside those 10 curtains. I have to draw those curtains back in the opposite order. So if I want to understand the plagues, I have to look at them as going in the opposite order of the statements. I need to look at the last of the statements to understand the first of the plagues. What was the last of the statements? So the last of the statements was a Kadosh Baruch Hu gave over to man control over his sustenance. He gave to him the plants, right? Everyone was a vegetarian in those days. I guess they're actually vegans, whatever. Anyway, Kadosh Baruch Hu gives control to man control over the plants. What's the idea there? That's what's called the Midah of Malchus. So again, in the stage of creation, first the Kadosh Baruch Hu, the creation begins with inspiration to create, but it ends with the actual creation of what you intended to create and the release of that creation as an independent object. Think of it as giving birth to a child, right? Ultimately, in creating a child, you're creating someone who's an individual. The ultimate goal is that should be an independent individual. I want to give that individual the gift of independent existence. I'm trying to give him substantive independent existence. It's called Malchus because I have to create a person who is himself independent, has a sense of independence. So the last act of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's creation, after he's created man, is to give him control over his sustenance, to give him plants and the animals, so that ultimately man becomes responsible for his own sustenance. He becomes independent. Now, what's the purpose of giving man this independence? Again, it's a gift of giving a person substantial existence, but ultimately, again, the idea was God's created the world in order that we can have a relationship with him. If we have a relationship with him, we have to be able to emulate him. The Kadosh Baruch Hu is an independent operator. He's a king. He has to give us that sense of kingship of Malchus also. That independence is what allows me to resemble a Kadosh Baruch Hu sufficiently that I can meaningfully connect up to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, right? A rock can't really connect to a Kadosh Baruch Hu in a meaningful way. A human being who has that same substantive existence as a Kadosh Baruch Hu on a certain level, that independence can connect up to him. The last act of creation is giving man that sense of independence. So in a certain sense, that one of the facets of the 10 facets of creation is that which exists in the world, giving man the opportunity to be independent. One manifestation of that would be the Nile, which is what gave the Egyptians the capability of sustaining themselves and made Egypt the breadbasket of the ancient world. But the purpose of giving that independence is in order that you should emulate a Kadosh Baruch Hu and connect up to him. That independence can be misunderstood. Instead of recognizing that independence as a creation of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, to give me the capability of emulating and relating to him, I can instead understand that independence to be something that has nothing to do with creation. It's just something that gives me independence. I'm able to exist in my own right. That was the misunderstanding the Egyptians had of this 10th fast of creation. Instead of interpreting it as a created reality, giving the opportunity for connection to Kadosh Baruch Hu, actually something that blocked out the connection to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. They saw the Nile really as a projection of themselves. In fact, the Navi tells us that Paro actually understood the Nile to be his own creation. In other words, they saw the Nile, all of Egypt recognized Paro as the personification of the totality of the Egyptian people, and Paro himself understood himself to be identical with the Nile. He understood himself to be the source of the Nile, without going into the details of how idolatry worked in those days. But the Nile was a projection of Paro rather than a gift from a Kadosh Baruch Hu to allow us to be able to relate to him. So now something that ultimately is supposed to be a facet of creation facilitating a connection to Kadosh Baruch Hu has been turned by the Egyptians into a curtain which obscures the face of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Comes a Makkah to clarify the true nature of this aspect of creation, which is manifest in Egypt as the Nile. What does that mean? I mean, what it looks like to us is a Kadosh Baruch Hu is basically saying, "You're misusing it. Whap! I'm going to, I'm going to take it away from you." Okay, on a certain level, but there's a deeper significance to this. What's really going on over here is the point of the plagues is not to punish Egypt. The point of the plagues is actually to reveal the Kadosh Baruch Hu as the creator. What effectively is happening in what was experienced by the Egyptians as the plague of the Nile is a Kadosh Baruch Hu is revealing the Nile as a gift of a Kadosh Baruch Hu in an unambiguous way in which you cannot connect up to the Nile except as a gift from a Kadosh Baruch Hu. The Egyptians were incapable of doing that because it was so deeply a part of their way of looking at the world. The Egyptian worldview, the Egyptian identity that the Nile was a projection of Pharaoh, they were incapable of relating to the Nile in that way. So the Nile, as what the Nile actually was, became blocked off from them, was cut off from them. The Jews who were capable of recognizing the Nile that way, when they drank from the Nile, it was water, because they could relate that unambiguous expression of what the Nile is. But the Egyptians who could not relate to the reality of the Nile instead saw mirrored to themselves their own misunderstanding of what the Nile was. Because what did they understand the Nile to be? They understood the Nile to be a projection of Paro. Well, what is the liquid life force of Paro? Like any other human being, it's blood, right? So for the Egyptians, right, this is one of the mysterious aspects of these plagues, especially one of the most mysterious one of the Nile, during the Nile and the blood, was for the Jews, it was water. For the Egyptians, it was blood. They could drink out of the same cup. For the Jew, it was water. For the Egyptian, it was blood. And it wasn't just an illusion. That's why the Pesukim go out of their way to tell us that all the fish in the Nile died also. It really was blood for the Egyptians. But it was water for the Jews. What's going on, what we're calling a plague is not really a plague. What's happening is a Kadosh Baruch Hu is revealing creation in an unambiguous manner, that it can only be understood as a creation. If you cannot relate to that, and the Egyptians couldn't, then they're cut off from the reality of what this facet of existence is about. They were cut off from what the Nile was, which was water, and instead could only see a mirror of their own misunderstanding. But the Jews who were capable of understanding, they were able to drink water. One of the advantages of understanding it in this manner is we understand that, again, what's happening in Egypt is not that God is bringing down 10 plagues on the Egyptians. What he's doing is he is bringing down sequentially an unambiguous understanding or experience of reality as a creation. And if you can't relate to it in that way, then you are cut off from the reality of that facet of existence. When we look at the Eser Makos, that's the way that we want to understand them. I'll give you a metaphor for sort of looking at the plagues generally, and then we'll open it up. I don't want to go into the details. If you want more, we can do them, and then you can always buy the book. Remember, it's a school to have one for every room. Anyway, but I'll give you a metaphor for understanding it. Think of it as two trees. You have an Egyptian tree and you have a Jewish tree. The Jewish tree has its naturally evolved or developed in Eretz Yisrael, which is a very, very dry place. If you want to get water, the roots have to go deep, deep down to plug into and draw water from the pure aquifer that lies underneath the ground. So Jewish trees have very, very deep roots. Our Egypt is a place where there's lots and lots of water from the Nile. It overflows. The ground is full of water. So the Egyptian tree has roots that go much shallower because they're able to draw water from the ground itself. Both of these trees are a trunk with 9 branches, and each branch and the trunk each have their own individual root system for feeding that particular branch. The Jewish roots all go all the way down to the aquifer, because that's where the water was in Eretz Yisrael. But in Egypt, each one of these roots goes to different depths inside of the ground because they're able to get the water out of the ground also. We take our Jewish tree and we plant it and it comes down to Egypt, and it sits in Egypt for 210 years, whatever it is, and the tree is not a stupid tree. Why go to all the effort of drawing water from all the way down to the deep, deep depths? You can start taking water out of more shallow aspects of the ground. Problem is the water there is not so clean. It's a little bit dirty, but it's very easy. So the tree becomes a little bit misshaped, misformed, but at least it's surviving. You have the Jewish tree transposed into Egypt. It's acting like an Egyptian tree now, taking its water out of the ground instead of from the pure aquifer underneath. It becomes deformed. Now, what happens when there's a drought in Egypt, or the Nile doesn't come up and bring water onto the land? The top layer of the ground begins to dry out. So the Egyptian branch that has a shallow root that's taking water from the top layer of the ground, the branch begins to wither. The Jewish branch has been taking water from that level also, but it also has a root that goes all the way down to the aquifer. So when there's no water in the ground for the branch to feed on, it doesn't die. It's forced to take its water from the pure depths again and become a green and healthy branch. More time passes. No more water in Egypt. Another layer of the ground dries out. The next Egyptian branch, which has a root that goes down to that second layer, no water. That branch withers and dies out. The equivalent branch on the Jewish tree was drawing water from that same place, can't get any water there anymore. It's forced, once again, to use the full depth of the root and draw its water out of the depth, the pure aquifer underneath. And so on, one after another. Basically, Kadosh Baruch Hu is cutting off these artificial and corrupted sources of nourishment and existence, and forcing those that are able, which is the Jewish people that have that capability, forcing them to go to a deeper root of existence, to find the true root of existence, find Kadosh Baruch Hu. The Egyptians are not able to do that, so they experience the drought is really a redirection of attention to Kadosh Baruch Hu as a source of reality. The Jews who are capable of doing that, each one of what we call plagues were actually educational experiences that enlightened them to their relationship to Kadosh Baruch Hu as the creator. But it was experienced by the Egyptians as a plague because they were not able to modify themselves to be able to relate to Kadosh Baruch Hu, the creator. For them, it was experienced as a plague. For us, it was a refuah. It was actually a healing because it pushed us to come and understand the world in an accurate way, what we originally inherited from our forefathers and forgotten. Because Baruch Hu was the source of reality. When we're looking at the plagues, this is the way that we want to look at them in the overall. Want to get together again, we can talk about a little bit more that sort of the structure of what these 10 are really about, what these different stages are in the process of creation, and how it is sort of step by step we're coming to recognize the different facets of existence as actually different aspects of a Kadosh Baruch Hu's creation, and through that, coming to recognize existence as creation, coming to recognize the creator. That's like a first overview. Yeah. If you come over here so they can hear your question. Yeah, so you really want to say that this early in the question. So Ms. Kagan has a question. You can unmute. Whoever wants to unmute can unmute if you have a question. And if you don't have a question, then we're going to ask Mrs. Kagan's question. Any questions? You're all asleep. How are we doing? Are we okay? Okay, I got a few. What? Anyone questions? Should I ask Mrs. Kagan's question?
Yes, please.
Did any of the Egyptians have the ability to, through the Makot, recognize Hashem? And if not, it was only for the Jews, or like did other nations grow from it also?
Well, I mean, Egypt. So that everybody hear the question. The question was, were any of the Egyptians able to sort of reform their view based on this, and how does this actually sort of reflect on other nations generally in terms of sort of witnessing sort of the Jewish process and coming to recognition of Hakadosh Baruch Hu? So first of all, when it comes to Paro himself, what we recognize as the personification of the essence of what Egypt is really all about, the answer is he's the classic case where it says that Hakadosh Baruch Hu hardened his heart. What that means is, even if he would knuckle under and let the Jews go, it's not because he had actually changed his way of looking at the world, but he was just tired of the pain that he was experiencing as a result of the fact that he wasn't looking at it correctly. So God's hardening his heart is basically, the point over there is, when you look at Paro, you're looking at someone who personifies Egypt in its essence in the Egyptian worldview. He's someone who cannot be reformed. What that means is that his Yetzer Hara, his evil inclination, basically come to infect his free will to the point where it's just, he's gone, and now it becomes effectively a puppet for other people to learn from. And ultimately, most importantly, the Jews. Whether or not any Egyptians as sort of individuals, as opposed to Paro personifying the society as a whole, we do see that the Arab, there were a number of people that actually did join the Jews when they left Egypt. That we understand that their motives were mixed. They weren't necessarily completely pure, but you certainly see on some level that there are, on an individual level, there's a possibility for people sort of learning. That's true generally when we project on sort of the Jewish experience, historic experience of traveling through different societies, there's always the possibility of individuals themselves understanding on a profound level HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the creator and changing both their worldview and who they are in the world as a result of that. The society as a whole, I think normally the way that we would look at them is the possibility exists, but that's pretty rare that a whole society would reform themselves. We do have things like the case of the Kuzari and his people. There is such a thing as a possibility existing that a whole nation would change. But generally speaking, that idea of changing over is not something that takes place in the context of sort of our historical period, but it is something that does happen when we talk about when we understand what the whole concept of the arrival of the Mashiach is about, is that most of these nations, with the exception of Amalek, and question of what Rome fixed that picture, Amalek is like Paro, is unreformable. But the other peoples of the world, they are reformable, and we understand most of Mashiach is a time when that's going to be happening on a national, cultural level. But individuals are always able to do it. In fact, even when we talk about somebody like Haman, the Gemara tells us explicitly that some of his descendants, learned Torah in Yerushalayim, and they say that about all the they say that about most of the great leaders that have actually been have caused us so much problem. They're descendants of theirs that were teachers of Torah, that were great teachers of Torah. So there's a spark. There's a spark there that is reformable in most circumstances.
So then,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So then, would the Makot being such a loud display that was seen by like across the whole world, was that for the purpose, like it being so big and loud, for those individuals that could change rather than the nations? Meaning, like Bnei Israel could have seen this all change without like the whole world having to like see its effects.
So the truth is, when you talk about the Eser Makos, we don't hear so much about other people talking about it. Kriyas Yamsuf is a different story. With Kriyas Yamsuf, we do hear Rachav, for example, talking about the fact that everybody was aware of Kriyas Yamsuf. In other words, the whole idea is what happened in Mitzrayim was actually a localized experience. That's a significant aspect of what was going on there. In fact, the Medrash actually says that the borders of Egypt were drawn based on where the Makkah reached. If there were disputes over where the border was supposed to be with other states, they could determine by where the Makkah went to and where it stopped. So an important aspect of what's going on with the Makos is it's localized within Egypt. That's the distinguishing characteristic of what happened in Kriyas Yamsuf, which was considered something that was taking place on a global level. And we do see, for example, again, Rachav talking about the fact that the Canaanim were well aware of what happened in Kriyas Yamsuf, and that was something that had really grabbed their attention. It's not something that caused them to suddenly convert to Judaism, but it was something that gave them a kind of empty sense that when the Jews were coming, there wasn't a lot that they were going to be able to do about it. But again, it's like you see Rachav changing, changing radically and converting. You see Yisro converting, but you don't see it for the most part on a national level.
But Rabbi, it seems that the way we're looking at the layers here of the Makot, that like you were saying about the tree, where all the layers are sort of peeling off until they have to go to the clean fresh water.
Yeah.
It would seem that by the end of this process, all the Egyptians would convert because it was so straightforward, and only Paro's heart was hardened. So I'm a little bit lost as to where we lost all the Egyptian people and so many of the Jews who didn't convert.
Well, no, see, but you see the fact that the way I was trying to describe it to you is the fact that the Egyptians experienced it as a Makkah meant that they were not able to adopt that other way of looking at it. I think that's the whole point. In other words, they were sufficient. They were so.
Okay, so it's only in hindsight that's what we're supposed to learn.
Pardon me?
So it's only in hindsight, meaning only later that's what we're supposed to learn.
No, we learned on the spot. And that was the point. Was it's not that a plague was brought. What was brought was an unambiguous expression of this facet of creation as a created entity. Those who could relate to it as a created entity were connected to that reality. Those who could not were cut off from it and therefore experienced it as a Makkah. But the could not, I think, is the point over here. If they could, they would have seen it differently. It wouldn't have been a Makkah for them. But the reason why it was so difficult is because the whole Egyptian identity was built around the idolatry of Paro and sort of the place of man in the schema of existence. They really did not have, they would have had to be not, they would have to become not themselves in order to look at the world in the context of Kadosh Baruch Hu, the creator. The Jews were in the opposite situation, was such that these revelations were actually bringing them back to who they truly were, which was why they were able to do it.
But then,
sorry, by taking the question, then how come so many people, so many Jews died during Makot Koshach? If it was a revelation and it was supposed to be that, then how come so many people were lost still?
So it's not 100% clear how many Jews were lost in the Makot. Everybody hear question? The question is, the Medrash tells us that 4/5 of the Jews died in the Makot Koshach. And they happened in the Choshech so they could be buried without the Egyptians knowing, so that they wouldn't think that the Jews were subject to the plagues also. So it's important to realize that if you go look at that actual Medrash, one Medrash says 4 out of 5, one says 40 out of 50, one opinion says 400 out of 500, and one says, I think that, but the point is, each one of those, if you recognize that it's being literal, it would turn out that there were basically several billion people in Egypt, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. So if you understand that from the fact that it's 1 out of 5 made it, 1 out of 50, or 1 out of 500, what you realize is the Medrash is communicating something other than the literal. It's not trying to tell you 1 in 5. It's trying to tell you that a fifth of the Jews got out. Doesn't necessarily mean a fifth, meaning 4 out of 5 died. It means 4/5 of each individual did not make it out of Egypt. Why the significance of that number would be a longer discussion. It has to do with some things that we've said during the course of the year about the significance of A with the Yud and the Daled, meaning the Yud inside of the Daled represents my connection to spirituality, and we're leaving a part of ourselves behind in Mitzrayim. So again, if you read the whole Medrash, it's a machlokas whether it was 1 in 5 got out, 1 in 50, or 1 in 500. The one that says 1 in 500 means that would have had to have meant there were 1.5 billion Jews in Mitzrayim at the time. It doesn't seem terribly realistic. So that forces you to recognize we're dealing with a medrash that should not be taken literally. I'm not saying that, according to what I'm saying, it's not necessarily the case that any of the Jews actually died in Makot Koshach, but there was a part of us that we left behind. It was a part that we were supposed to be leaving behind, because again, the whole point was that these Makos were a healing for the Jewish people, meaning the whole point of being in exile in Egypt was that we adopted the Egyptian worldview. And the whole point of the Makos was we were healed from that illness, that misunderstanding, that illusory understanding of the world. We left a part of us behind, but it's the part that we wanted to leave behind was left in its time. I think that's a actually much more accurate way of understanding that medrash.
That's a really nice answer.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question. Sorry.
Yeah, loud. Sharon, you want to add something?
Yeah, so I don't know if it's a medrash, but I remember learning that they were in such a rush to leave Egypt because they were on the lowest level of Tuma, and if they stayed longer. But wouldn't it be at the 10th plague, Hashem is so revealed? How is it possible that they'd still be on such a low level at that point?
I want to pass this one to Mrs. Kagan. No, so they ask good questions. I think the way to understand it is that the easier way to understand it is that low level is when did the process of departure begin? Meaning once these plagues are already coming, the process of moving away. In other words, where they talk about that is at the end of Parshat Shmos, which is before these plagues have begun. Meaning that Moshe is telling the Kadosh Baruch Hu, we can't take it anymore. We're going to be completely lost if we're still in this galus. And the Kadosh Baruch Hu says, "Oh, you can't take it anymore. Okay, so then we will begin the Exodus now." I think the way to understand that 49th level of Tuma stuff is not so much at the end. I mean, I think there may be some Chazal to say differently, but I think the easiest way to understand it is that we're not talking about the end of the process there. We're talking about when the process had to begin. Once the process began, then they were already on their way out. In other words, the reason why that's significant is because they were in the exile in Mitzrayim for a reason. There were things that needed to be developed while they were there. And to say they were on the 49th level of Tumah and that they had to leave immediately meant that there wasn't enough time to take care of everything. There was stuff that was left over, and that's the reason why we have the modern exiles that we're experiencing today. But the way to understand that, I think, most accurate, most easily, is to recognize that 49th level of Tumah is referring to where they were before the process of Geula begins. Once that process of Geula begins, effectively a certain level of the exile is already over, and they're no longer developing what they need to develop. I think that's really what it's talking about. I don't think we're saying that they're on that lowest level of Tumah by the time they're seeing that last Makkah, because they've already gone through. The bigger question is why they weren't completely purified by the time they get to the 10th Makkah. That's another distinction. I hinted at what's going on there from the fact that there was a profound difference in the level and depth of what they were experiencing after they left Mitzrayim and when they came to Kriyas Yamsuf. In other words, there's still stuff to do, but still a tremendous amount to do. But there's like a certain aspect of the Geula development of the Jewish people that is finished through that 10th plague. That's why they're able to actually begin the process of physically leaving Egypt. There's more to do when they get to Kriyas Yamsuf, and there's even more to do when they get to Har Sinai.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so Mrs. Kagan wants to know how we can relate the coronavirus to the, it's a Makkah. It's a Makkah. It's a Megefa. Yeah. I mean, look, one of the things that I think is really, really important to recognize when we're going through something like this on a national level. I mean, again, I think it's probably less accurate to describe the virus as a Makkah, because the Makot in Mitzrayim were things that really the Egyptians sustained, and we were supposed to learn from witnessing the Egyptians sustaining them. This is something that we ourselves are experiencing. So this virus is not so much a Makkah in the equivalent sense of what we're talking about today. It's a gullus. It's a level of gullus. You learn about a Kadosh Baruch Hu from gullus just like you learn from a Kadosh Baruch Hu in Geula. And so it's relevant to ask, what are we supposed to be getting out of this particular thing? I guess, I mean, one of the things I would want to say is like this. Very important that it's very important. There's one of the more gruesome midrashim describing what was going on in Mitzrayim is the one that tells us that what really broke Moshe when he turned to Kadosh Baruch Hu and said, we can't take it anymore at the end of Parshat Shmos, was the fact that once they were given the decree of the straw, they were not able to finish their quota of bricks. And whatever bricks they didn't finish, the Egyptians used Jewish babies to fill in the spaces in the wall. And that's what the Medrash says. And that was the thing that that really drove the Jews over the top to say, we just can't do this anymore. So in the Medrash, Moshe says, we can't do this anymore. So Kadosh Baruch Hu says, you don't like what I'm doing, take one out and see what happens. So Moshe withdrew one of the babies from the wall, and it turned out to be Micha, right? The one who, in the end, actually was the direct cause of the building of the golden calf. So there's a number of things being communicated in this Medrash. It's saying that the process of Golus, of going through Golus, and the pain of Golus is actually a purification of the Jewish people. And when Moshe says, I don't want this, so Kadosh Baruch Hu basically shows him that by stepping back from this, what's happening is that there's a level of purification we needed. It's actually not happening. Now, again, in Mitzrayim, they had to leave when they left. They couldn't have stayed another moment longer. They could not finish the process. They had to leave then, and we're left with what we need to do in future generations. That's fine. But the point that I think is important to realize is the Medrash would seem to imply that the children who were dying in the wall were the ones who contained the evil of the Jewish people and the ones that needed to be taken out. And it's 100% clear that that is not what the Medrash is trying to communicate. For example, when we look in the experience of the Golas, of the Holocaust, right, the people that were lost were often the strongest and best elements of the Jewish people that were sacrificed. Basically, when the Jewish people have to experience pain and suffering on a national level to bring them to whatever purification, we can talk about that purification in a minute, to bring them to some purification, it's not the ones who are weak and need to be removed that are lost, it's the strongest. It's the ones who are capable of, in a certain sense, handling what's happening for the sake of the nation, that the nation as a whole should be purified. We're going through a very painful process right now. People, we're losing people, we're losing some very special people as a result of this virus. And we understand that this is, that this is a process of purification, but by saying it's a process of purification, it doesn't mean that the people that we may be losing as a result of it, I'm not saying that's the only aspect. There's the Parnassa issue here also. There's so many things that are going on, but that's one of the ones that sort of stands out, I think, most powerfully in people's mind at this point. That those that we're losing is not because those are the ones that we need to lose. If anything, those are the ones that we're losing because those are the ones who are capable of shouldering the responsibility of that pain. That on a national level we should become purified either through what we're learning consciously or what's happening on so many levels that go beyond our comprehension. If you want to talk about what that suffering is about, I mean, it's like, what is it that we need to be learning? So on a certain level, we spoke about this for those who were on the alumni classes that we gave the last 2 weeks, that that this situation is forcing us to make choices about the way we relate to modern society in the sense of technology, right? Are we allowing technology to replace our relationships with people, or is technology only a facilitator, and that what life is really about is those genuine human engagements that can be so easily lost when we process our lives through screens? As we're being forced, in a certain sense, we're being pushed to these screens even more as a result of our situation, in order to have the opportunity to recognize this is really not where we want to be going, be able to pull back on a certain level. And again, this is part of a longer discussion. Anybody who wants to hear that, those classes are recorded. I'm happy to send you the links for those who are interested. But a defining characteristic of the society that we find ourselves in today is the continual degradation of our sense of the significance and sanctity of what it is to be human, and becomes increasingly, becoming increasingly dumbed down and replaced by technology, machines, objects, and to a certain extent, the experience that we're having right now is we're being pushed, each one of us in the situation we find ourselves in, to be defining a little bit more clearly what it is that we really want and how it is that we value human relationships, and how it is that we sort of go about building those relationships, and how it is that we relate to technology as either a buffer, a barrier, or a facilitator to genuine relationships with people. Is that a reasonable answer? Yeah. That helpful? Anyone who wants that link, if you send me a WhatsApp, I'm happy to send you the link to. We actually did two share on them with the alumni.
Rabbi Kagan, can I ask a question that's a bit off topic?
First, identify yourself.
Hi, Eliza.
Hi, Eliza. How are you?
Hi, good. So you said before that we were on the 49th level of Tuma, and that's why we need this whole process. At the same time, you wrote that there's a medrash that says that we were taken out because of the level of Emuna that we had. So how do those two go together? Like if Tuma isn't lack of.
No, it's what the medrash says is in the schus of our Emuna we were taken out. What that means is there's a certain underlying base which really defines us, that Emuna is essential, because what it means is that since it's who we are, as we get pulled further and further away from it, we become increasingly aware of the fact that we're losing ourselves. It's like there's no contradiction between the two. The whole point is, even though that is the basis of what we call the Jewish personality, that Emuna, there's all kinds of layers that get put on top of that obscures it. And the process of Gullus is a process of removing those layers to allow that Emuna to shine through, become a more integrated part of who we are. But the only thing that allows that process to successfully actualize itself is the fact that that base of Emuna is there. That's the point that's being made so clearly by the Medrash when it says in the Schlussah when we left. Because that's when you think about it, is actually we have two seemingly contradictory statements. Number one, we only got out because of our Emuna. Number two, the only reason we were getting out is so that we should come to Emuna. How do you put those two together? So the answer is because we need to bring that Emuna to a much more developed state than what it is as sort of that sort of beating heart underneath the surface. But if we didn't have that beating heart under the surface, there would be no point in going through the process, because we would experience exactly the same way the Egyptians did, which is it would have been a Makot for us, would have been a plague rather than something that enlightened us to a deeper level of understanding of reality.
So it was more potential than what we had at the time?
Well, I don't know if I want to just call it, it is both potential, but what it means is it is it is our basic self, but it's not actualized. So you want to call it potential? In a sense, it is potential, but it was there on a certain level already, because the whole point is when Moshe came down and said to the Jews, I just talked to God, they believed him. Meaning, and that's where the Medrash gets the fact that b'schus Emuna, we were taken out of Egypt. There was at base level, but it's nothing like what they had when it says Vayiminu b'Hashem Moshe Avda, when Kol Yisrael got to the Yam Suf, and it says that they believed in the Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's a totally different level of Emuna, having gone through the whole process of, at that point they'd already gone through the exile in the first one, but they went through the Makos, and they come to Kriyas Yam Suf, and the journey to Kriyas Yam Suf. We've got this whole process. The Emuna is a completely different level, and we're not done yet. We have to get ourselves to our Sinai, where it's Gam Yaminu La'olam. We come to the point where we have an eternal Emuna and a Kadosh Baruch Hu. But yeah, you want to call it potential? Yeah, it's like what it calls is the essential identity of the Jew of a Jew is that Emuna. That's the underlying basis, the essential identity of the Jew. We lose sight of it, and we need to go through experiences that remind us and allow us to remember that that's who we are, what we want to be, that we want to develop our personality around it. That all these kinds of experiences are really just teaching us different ways of sort of accessing that and working on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, ladies, you're asking great questions, but do you want to now go back to your cleaning? I guess it's like sometimes when I'm doing recruiting in the States, it's like it's math classes comes afterwards, so they want me to go on and on and on about the seminary. All right, whatever, just joking. Anyway, okay, ladies, you were very patient. If you want to have a follow-up class on this to get into understand on a little bit more detailed level, send me a WhatsApp and we can try and see if we can find another time to do a class. It won't be before Pesach, that's for sure. But if anybody wants it, can go ahead and send me a WhatsApp. We can think about it. The other option is to buy the book, right? I make a whole $1 off of every one that you purchase. It's a we have one in every room. But if you want to understand this in any kind of a detail, if you have the book, then that gives you the chance of both looking at it very clearly, thinking about it as you're going through it. And there's a lot more stuff in there in addition to what we're talking about tonight. Okay,
Which
ladies,
book?
have a great Pesach. A pleasure to see you all. You're all missed. I hope you miss us as much as we miss you.
Bye, everyone. Have a great
Hi,
week.
Robertson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
bye,
you so
everyone.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
We're
Thank you.
thinking about you.
Thank you.
Miss you all. Bye.
Bye.
Rabbi Kagan, what's the name of the book?
The Intellect and the Exodus, Authentic Emuna for a Complex Age, I think it is. Yeah, I have to go and get a copy, right? It's a Koren book. If you want to get it, go to the Koren site. They'll mail it to you, and it'll be delivered by a masked man looking something like Zorro, but without the sword.
Gotcha. All
It's
right,
on
fine.
sale. That's the time to buy it. It's much cheaper than it usually is.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Pleasure. Almost no present students.
How are you, Rabbi?
Pleasure. Who's there?
Michal.
Hi, Michali. How are you?
Very good. I wanted to see if just to say hi.
Yeah, well, wait, Ms. K's going to come over because she wants to say hi too.
Hi, Reb. How are you?